Great. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started.
Sorry, just a second. Okay, we're good.
There's Mandy and Allison. I think we're all here. All right, we'll go ahead and start the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee meeting. Thanks for everyone who are here. There's snacks at the table, so I don't know if that means it's going to be a long meeting or that's just a slight hint, but we have a lot of fun things to cover today. So roll call, I think, has been done. I'm going to open it up for public comments. There are a couple people out here, but I know you're going to be speaking later. Is there any public comment in the audience or anyone that is joining us virtually?
Go virtual.
Anyone? All right.
Barb Campbell has her hand up.
Oh yeah, let's move. Can you move me and Barb over?
Hold on, Barb. We're going to move you over and then.
Oh, she is. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Cheyenne is in the attendees list, as well as Lynn, Melissa Kamanya, Sarah Hudson, and Tyson O'Connell. Do you want?
Can you move everybody over?
Yep.
Thank you.
Great. Barb, good to see
Hi.
you, Counselor
Oh,
Campbell.
you're-
You're outside. I don't know why it's awful out there.
It's kind of good news, bad news. I got some germs that I'm keeping to myself. But yeah, it's an excuse to be out here. So I just wanted to let you know I'm here, and I'm sorry I'm not in person, Cindy.
No problem. Glad you can make it.
Oops.
Terrific. All right. Did everyone have a chance to review the September minutes? All right. Any comments or questions about the minutes before we vote? All right, I'll put it out to a vote. All in favor of the September minutes, please raise your hand. We'll take a count. Looks like everyone who is voting is yes, so unanimous. There we go. Thank you so much. Great minute taker. Oh, that's a job. That is a job. Sarah, you're joining us remotely, correct? Sarah is next on the agenda for reviewing the SDC exemption renewal. And Lynn, is there anything else you want to introduce Sarah with? Or I know I'm correct, so sometimes I miss something.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I'm hearing an echo still. I don't know if everybody is. Is everybody's computer off sound wise, hopefully? Anyway, okay. So Sarah Hudson is a senior management analyst, I believe that's her title, with the City of Bend, and has been working on our SDC process methodology and some sort of quirks around exemptions. So you all are the group that knows about SDC exemptions for affordable housing, probably better than anyone. That exemption program will expire as planned at the end of this calendar year. So we intend to bring a renewal back to council at the first November meeting, I believe, so that it is approved in time. It is part of council goals to have the SDC exemption renewal happen for affordable housing. However, we thought it was probably pretty important to get y'all's advice and opinion on that before we brought it to council. So I think Sarah, also great opportunity to just get a quick update on methodology and what's happening with that from Sarah. So at the end of this, I think the staff request is, do you support the SDC exemption for affordable housing getting renewed for a 2-year period? She'll talk you through that. And that's really sort of what we're looking for. And if you do, I can tell you what our options are with that. So with that, Sarah, take it away. Did I get your title right?
Yes, you did. And you keyed this all out very well. Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen.
You're kind of quiet right now.
Oh.
So yeah, we can hear you. You're just quiet.
Okay. Should I speak very loudly? Does that help? I can do that. I'm from the East Coast. Let's see. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll just start by doing a really high level overview of SDCs. It sounds like this group is really familiar with these, so I'll make it really quick. But essentially, system development charges are one-time fees assessed on new development and on some types of redevelopment. They're governed by state statute and the Bend Municipal Code. And it's really just a mechanism for us to pay for growth in the system by growth in the system. So we use it to pay only for capital improvements. It's strictly only used for those purposes. You can't use it for things like maintenance. It has to be for capital costs. And we really look to have it around transportation, water, sewer, and we also assess fees on behalf of Bend Park and Recreation District. By Oregon statute, you can assess stormwater fees, but the city of Bend does not currently do that. And a majority of cities in Oregon collect SDCs. So just covered this really quickly. What are SDCs used for? So in the city, we use them for sewer, transportation, and water projects. Again, it can only be for capital improvements. It can only be for growth-related portion of those capital improvements. We have an intergovernmental agreement with Bend Parks and Rec so that we implement and assess those fees on their behalf, but they have their own methodology that we're hoping to align better to through updating the SDCs in this work that we're taking on. So what are we embarking on? Lynn queued it up really well, but essentially it was part of City Council goal that we update our transportation system development charge methodology. It's overdue. It hasn't been updated in many years. And that also that we continue these affordable housing initiatives, so including the SDC exemption for affordable housing. But as we're kind of embarking on this work, we're realizing, okay, if we're going to go in and do this type of work, not only shall we update the transportation SDC methodology, but let's also update the water SDCs. Those are pretty overdue for us to take a look at as well. And then we also want to take a look at all of our SDCs, so transportation, water, and sewer, really looking at the structures of those to make sure that they're in alignment. Right now, there's a little bit of disparity between them, and it makes it a little hard to implement. It can be confusing for development community. So how can we bring all of that into alignment? And there really is a lot of reason for doing this all at once. It's like, okay, if we're going to go through this effort, it's just going to be most efficient if we look at everything at once. We'll have a more streamlined discussion that's more holistic. The development community isn't concerned about what are we getting charged over here or what are we getting charged over there. It's really about the full picture. So it allows us to have that holistic look at it. And it allows us to coordinate with BPRD, as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago. We also want to take a more holistic look at those policy related issues. So how are we incentivizing affordable housing? How are we using SDCs as a mechanism to accomplish some of our policy objectives? So as part of this work, it's really important to do a stakeholder engagement process. So that will really be the bulk of this work, take up the better part of a year, I would imagine. So we really want to make sure we have representatives from the development community, that we're using an equity lens. And then we also want to make sure we have the affordable housing lens as well. And so that's kind of an open question to this group. I'm not sure if we want to broach it now or if it's something for consideration, but does this group have recommendations of folks who want to be plugged into that stakeholder group process? Do you have recommendations of people who should be involved? But we really want to make sure that we have you at the table so that we can have a really well-rounded and informed policy discussions. So Lynn, I don't know, do you want to kind of pause here and we chat about this, or should I kind of keep moving?
So I think what we'll be looking for at some point is a volunteer or two to serve. Okay. Sarah, you may have missed the quick on the draw from Kathy Austin, but she's in.
Great.
So there's some enthusiasm from this group to participate in a future stakeholder group. And I think really the question for you all is, do you feel like this exemption has worked to promote the type of housing that you think we need in the community? And if so, it probably makes sense for AHAC to weigh in favor of the renewal, at least for 2 years. until we get the methodology done. So Sarah, is that where you wanted me to go, or do you want me to talk about numbers?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this would be a good time just to mention, kind of pause to see if there's support for moving forward with the exemption. So essentially, the affordable housing exemption sunsets on January 1st, the daycare facility exemption on December 31st. So we're looking at extending those sunsets through the end of the methodology update, which we anticipate will be completed at the end of next year. But just so that we can give the development community assurances and confidence and make sure we buffer the time. We're really talking about a 2-year extension, just so we don't have to come back in a year if things run a little bit long. So yeah, that would be a new sunset of December 31st, 2024 for both of those exemptions. And we'd be looking to extend the period of housing affordability from 5 to 10 years. And really the idea is that once we update the methodologies, that these exemptions will be kind of baked into the methodology. So that's why we're looking at doing it through the period of just getting through this methodology update. So just, I guess, providing a little bit more background there, but I guess that's where we can pause and get the input of the group around whether there's support for this 2-year extension.
Are you in support or did you have a comment?
I'm supporting and I have a comment.
I didn't mean to press you to be in support.
First.
I do have a teenage son, so go ahead, Heather.
I mean, I certainly extending for 2 years to allow for the updating process makes sense to me. And I'll say that just today I was educating a member of the stakeholder group about the impact of SDCs. I didn't get into numbers, of course, but I think there might also be some perceptions that the size of, the housing need is so enormous. Do SDCs actually make that much of a difference? Is it worth the trade-offs to the agencies who are, diverting these dollars? And I was able to say it makes a huge difference. We're able to leverage quite a bit from those dollars. So I think there's opportunities to educate everyone involved that, yeah, it may be a relatively small sum of money compared to overall costs of projects, but they make a difference.
Yes, the amount of leveraging is very impactful. Any comments on this side?
I just would want to let the committee and everybody know that it can make a deal work or not, especially, not large deals. It could be a rounding error, I guess, but a 40 to 60 unit property, SDCs are sizable, and subsidies hard to get these days. So it's hugely impactful to make stuff work. I guess the one question I had is this 2-year study. I mean, this extends it, but are you contemplating any drastic changes to availability, or how many we can, like if there's slots, like a certain amount of slots for affordable per year, is there changes down the pike in that kind of process, I guess?
So for city SDCs, the staff recommendation is that the full blanket exemption, as I'm calling it, all 3 of our SDCs that are within our control are continued to be exempted without limit. The question is really timing. And we had hoped to be done with the methodology update right now, in which case there would be potentially a permanent exemption for affordable housing, depending on what council decides to do with it. So at this point, we're buying time. And then part of the discussion with methodology, we'll really look at that. Do we want to keep this blanket ordinance? Do we want to sort of mess with it in any way, shape, or form? Do we want to put caps on it? All of that.
Kathy.
Yeah, I'm of course very supportive, but I also want to point out that what Sarah had mentioned, and which I think is very important, is that we can use this to help reach our goals, the city's goals. And I'm hoping to be a part of your stakeholder group, Sarah. But I'd like to really look at equity, or look at this at an equity lens, and particularly with the size of housing and how we can use SDCs to try and encourage the kind of smaller housing that's harder to for developers to make pencil. And is what we really, really need in the community. And it's not the deed restricted affordable housing, it's that missing middle income type of housing that I think we can have an impact on. And so I'm hoping that as we move forward, there's some opportunities to look at that and acknowledge that while it is an impact fee, there's an opportunity for the city to think about it as a way to help support its goals. And it's not strictly just the impact fee aspect to it. So anyway, I'm very, very supportive, and I hope that this can be a permanent thing for the deed restricted housing, but I certainly support moving it for the 2 years.
Would AHAC be in favor of a permanent SDC exemption? Because right now, I think it's a 2-year situation that we're looking at, but you all certainly could recommend something different. Sorry, Matt, to cut you off.
No, I definitely am in favor of a permanent SDC exemption, assuming that the deed restricted affordable parcel is maintained as deed restricted affordable, and with the repayment if it was ever brought out about that. So there is incentive to keep it in the affordable pool with no restriction to how many doors.
Okay, thank you.
That's what I would like to recommend.
I concur with Matt.
Oh, Ian, thank you.
I hear it.
You're here, yay. Sorry, I was trying to get Ian in the meeting via text and email. Yeah, you're here. Ian, really quickly, Ian, what country are you in right now?
I'm not in Andorra. I am in Spain.
Okay, Spain. All right, here we go.
It's
So that might have been
like
the
midnight here.
You might be our farthest ranging AHAC member also calling into meetings. I'll say that.
Thank you, Ian.
Elizabeth,
Of course.
Elizabeth Oshel can speak.
Hi, Cindy. Thank you. Elizabeth Oshel with the City Attorney's Office. I did just want to speak up for sort of the approach through the methodology for looking at SDCs holistically. I think, we do want to make sure, and I know all of you know this, but that SDCs are set out in state statute, how you can create them, what you can use them for, and how to go about creating a methodology is also to a certain extent included in the state statutes. And so we do want to make sure through this methodology look that we're looking holistically. I think historically the city has looked at this exemption and then the childcare exemption sort of piecemeal. And so I think part of the intent of doing the project, as Sarah described it, is to take a holistic approach, and make sure that we can fit in these projects and the approach to SDCs that, as Kathy was discussing and you all have been discussing, meet the city's goals, but also comport with the SDC framework on a statewide level. And so that's where the discussion got from, within that framework, is it an SDC exemption that has a sunset and renews, or is it somehow baked into the methodology? So there may be different ways that we approach it. And I think that's something we'll be looking at with the stakeholder group, sort of understanding, if you're pulling out different pieces of SDC revenue, how does that affect the whole picture for needed improvements? So not discounting the importance and the benefit of the exemption to the projects, but just trying to paint that bigger picture that we don't quite know what the end result will be, or where these exemptions might live, or how they might come out of the methodology process. So things may change in how the exemption looks or how we're talking about it. It may not be in code in the future, for example. It may just be baked in to the SDC fee resolution, or there may be some other outcome. But that's all part of what's going to be talked about through the stakeholder process.
Great, thanks for that information. That clarified a couple things in my mind as well. That's awesome.
Barb Campbell.
Barb.
Councilor Campbell.
Yes, Councillor Campbell.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you. Hey, can you tell me if we can use SDC for transit projects?
We are not the transit agency, so we would not be funding transit projects with SDCs. Our transportation SDCs are for the portion of the transportation system that's our responsibility. So primarily improvements in the right of way. Now, sometimes that can include bus pullouts, for example, or a wider sidewalk section to accommodate a bus shelter, but it's really our transportation system are those transportation elements in the right of way. So just kind of simply.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Great. Well, with all of that input and support from AHAC, I think you have unanimous head nods for continuing with the SDCs and then having additional discussion with the stakeholder group. Kathy has volunteered. Thank you very much. Do you need another volunteer or just one and then maybe a backup one in case? What are you thinking, Lynn?
So Sarah, my thought is at this point, it probably makes sense to have one person on point, and then once we get the full stakeholder group scoped, then we can come back if we need additional folks or something. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Did I cut you off or are we wrapped?
I think we're wrapped. My last slide was just around timeline, but I just spoke to it at a high level. So just for this group's awareness, we initiated contract with the Ghilardi Rothstein group. They're the consultant that we'll be working with to do this methodology update and facilitate this stakeholder engagement. So we'll be kicking off at the end of this month. So things will begin very quickly. So we'll be in touch soon about what the timing of that stakeholder engagement, and can keep the group updated as well. And as mentioned before, our goal is to implement these updated SDCs by the end of next year. So that's it.
Thanks, Sarah. Kathy.
I should mention that I think I roll off in June of next year. And so we probably should have like a second person back up just in case I could possibly sit in as a cab member at that time, but
good point.
I just want to mention that I won't be here through the full end of next year. So,
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not that I ever want to leave this wonderful
know.
group. Please don't make me go. But yeah.
Thanks for that. All right, Amy. You are up.
I think Allison may have had something to say.
I was just going to say I'll be on point too to help Kathy or be involved. I'd like to be involved as well. So
Thanks, Allison.
Thanks, Allison.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon. I'm Amy Fraley with Housing, and I'm here to provide a shelter update and then do a synopsis today of the comp plan outreach. And just to ground the conversation, as you folks know, we've got 785 folks that have been identified as houseless in Bend through the 2020 point in time count. 382 shelter beds on our best night in Bend, and then 100 low barrier walk-up beds. As we talked about in September, Central Oregon Villages went before council last week with a completed phase 1 of their proposal for temporary outdoor shelter. They completed their House Bill 2006 application and received approval from the city. They secured the site in a lease between Central Oregon Villages and Desert Stream Church. And they did a lot of outreach, which was really important to council. They knocked on 200 doors. They held an open house and roundtable that involved more than 50 neighbors. They went to multiple Larkspur Neighborhood Association meetings. They went to the Bulletin Editorial Board. They answered countless emails and phone calls as well. They also went to the Deschutes County Fair and they applied that feedback, which was really important. They adjusted their high barrier entry requirements and conditions of placement. They added security as well as increased the staffing requirements. And from the neighborhood aesthetically, they replaced a chain link fence with a more pleasing option, visually pleasing, and they reduced the size of their footprint. And so this is what they brought forward as part of their 2006 application. There are 20 pellet shelters. Oh, let me orient it first. So this is on the corner of Bear Creek and 27. The church is located, it's set back a ways from the road. The church is located right here, and this will be behind the church. Benson Way, you can see it noted at the top, will be the access point, and that hammerhead there is where emergency vehicles can come in and turn around. This is where the car wash is and the Hilton, I believe. And so there's a natural tree line over on the east side over here that kind of shields the site privacy-wise from the neighbors. And there's also an existing pond that they're keeping irrigation. You can see that there's a food pantry area, meeting space, multiple bathrooms and space for the shower truck as well. They're going to prioritize women and children for entry, but they will take folks through coordinated entry as well as through relationships that they have existing with the community. There's portable toilets. They'll have water stations, daily delivery from Family Kitchen for one hot meal. And the program requirements include abstinence from drug and alcohol, not only on entry, but also they'll be testing throughout a client's stay at the shelter. They will be doing background checks to exclude folks with sexually harming behavior convictions, as well as any type of violent crime convictions. They require that clients participate in case management, as well as duties to keep the shelter up and running. Are there any questions about this site plan? All right. The other city involved shelters, as you all are aware, is Lighthouse Navigation Center. Those are those 100 overnight beds operated by Shepherd's House that have both day and night services. Evan was here last time talking about those and their successes. There's the Division Street shelter that is still under renovation. We're hoping to move folks in February of 2023. It'll be operated by Neighbor Impact. Currently, Neighbor Impact is at the former Rainbow Motel, where we are using 25 rooms and 39 folks are living there. And then there is the vacant lot at the Murphy Interchange next to Les Schwab that could potentially house a second outdoor shelter. I will say that this shelter has, the Central Oregon Villages shelter has a 3-year contract for a total of $1.5 million. 750,000 of that is city ARPA funds and 750,000 is county ARPA funds.
Is that for the Murphy?
That is for the one that's going to be out by Desert Street.
Oh, okay.
So for Murphy, probably the same number.
Okay.
Or that's what we would hope, but there is no plan yet.
Okay.
Right, Lynn?
Correct. Yeah.
So that is that. Is there anything that you wanted to add Lynn, before I jump into consolidated plans?
Go for it.
All right. Everybody knows that Rachel is working on the consolidated plan, the 5-year housing and community development strategic plan based on quantitative and qualitative data. I would be that qualitative part. And so I've had the opportunity and the privilege to go out and speak with folks in our community that are currently houseless. And thus far, I've talked to 95 folks at 7 different sites, including the ones listed here. A couple of those I've gone to twice, just to fully be able to talk with different people. And I will still go to Family Kitchen. It's on my list. I've been by casually, but not fully. Generally, people that are experiencing houselessness report feeling lost in the system and in houselessness as a whole. They acknowledge that there are very few options for shelter and affordable housing. And they note that there's a lot of critical needs that they feel are being met, which include water, electricity, showers, laundry, and shelter. The first question I ask, other than can I talk with you and ask you some questions, is do you feel safe? And overwhelmingly people respond yes, that they do. They feel community or their camp staff. There's a couple of areas that people mention consistently that raise concern. And one of those things is being forced to leave where they currently live. Another is the fear of being forced into congregate shelter because of PTSD, as well as COVID. It's noisy, you don't know your neighbors. There's a lot of reasons that congregate shelter creates some fear in people. Multiple folks on Huddle and Clausen report that they don't feel as though emergency services is responding quickly to their request for service. And fire safety is as well as pedestrian right away, especially out in China. I mean, the first thing people say that makes them feel unsafe is fire. And also too,
Okay. I've heard that the fire department goes to China Hat almost every day for various calls. It's a reliable source. And so I was just going to ask about that. Are there daily calls out there? It's a current fireman and he said we go there almost every shift, which is every day.
I have not seen them out there, and that is not something that the folks that are camping out there reported to me.
Okay,
And that doesn't mean that they're.
I just wanted to share that. Okay.
We can find out
Yeah.
from the fire chief if that's sort of part of their usual, yeah.
All right. I just wanted to throw that out.
And that's out there a lot.
Mhm.
Yes.
And I can say that there are a number of people out there who are following them. And it's not just the folks that are in Woodside there.
Right. No, correct. That's correct. Mhm.
Absolutely. And one of the other questions I ask is what people see as their barriers to permanent housing. And I've just listed, I won't go through and read all of them. Where I put something in italics is just an exact quote, and everything else is just kind of. And a lot of these reasons were tied to there was a particular gentleman who talked about how he had a job near Hummel and he had been walking to his job each day. And he explained he got fired, and he's like, I deserve to be fired. I'm free at work. I am so tired. He had fallen asleep, but he's like, it's impossible out here to sleep. It's impossible to get a shower. And he's like, everybody judged me. And so he was unable to maintain it. One of the surprising ones was those daycare slots. There was a woman who had children living with her in one. But it's not odd. And we thought about daycare and there being lots. Before I go to the next slide, one of the questions I ask people is what should the city know, or what should we prioritize? And I think that sometimes there's the perception that people don't have meaningful feedback. And I printed the slides for everybody because I know this one in particular is pretty overwhelming. But these are just some of the answers that people give me. And I think the theme here is more. People want more options, more housing, more shelter, specific housing for folks that are medically fragile or experiencing a mental health crisis, more coordination, and a place to camp. There's also accountability. I thought one of the interesting comments was a young woman who lived at the Loft, which is for youth that are experiencing houselessness over on Century Drive on Reggie Ray. That's the youth and families. She said that assistance, there ought to be one-time assistance that's situational. And she used that word. She's like, my family made enough money. We couldn't qualify for anything. But in that moment of crisis, there wasn't anyone for us to go to for help. And I just wish that somebody could have taken the whole scenario into consideration and helped us. So got a lot of good feedback. So I'll give this to everybody. And there'll also be a copy of in Rachel's comp plan of all of the outreach. The last question I typically ask folks is what they want others to know, what they want people who make decisions for their neighbors. And this list was longer, and Lynn helped me cut it down a little bit, and Rachel and Dina, because there are so many voices, and what they say is important. But these are some of the ones that encapsulated the experience of being houseless in Bend, and the loneliness, being tired and looking for a place to rest and feel safe. I thought it was nice when Lady said that Bend just has the kindest people. When they ask for the folks that are working full September, that one of the struggles the young woman was having at the Navigation Center is she works full-time in restaurant work and she can't wash her uniform. Like there is no way to come out of restaurant work without being covered every time. And she's like, I only have 2 shirts. And how these people maintain that full-time employment is amazing. So there was a gentleman who said that he had lived in Bend since the 90s, and he could, and what he had to do was shelter, and he's been there for months. He was part of a camp that was cleared. Just can't make my way back out. So I just wanted to share this. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I just want to thank you for doing that. And, I think what's important for people to understand is every individual is unique. Their situation is unique. You can't just lump people together. And like the one comment there, I'd appreciate if people wouldn't yell at me to go get a job and throw things. And because a lot of the people are working and there are service providers and they have no place to live. And so thank you. And if people don't read the bulletin, I hope you've had a chance every other Sunday. There's a very nice column highlighting another story of someone who's without a home. And I think it's really helped to personalize their stories and get that information out there. So anyway, just wanted to thank you.
Oh, I just want to say that I really admire your work here. I think this is really great and impactful. And just wanted to add something that I think people may have been hesitant to speak about is, and that I know through my work at Saving Grace, is the rates of sexual assault for women who are either in or near congregate shelters or camping is really high. So that's another safety risk, I think.
Very true.
Thank you, Amy, for the
Thanks so much.
update on a pretty heavy
It's a
topic.
privilege to do
Yes.
this work. There's nothing. And I like more than going out and talking to folks.
Much
Thank you for
appreciated.
that.
Yes.
And if anybody would like a hard copy for my tiny font, I have it.
All right. Rachel, you are up for this very exciting topic that you love so much.
So back during the summertime, I talked about changing the citizen participation plan to update some of the language to address more of limited English proficiency requirements. And there was a 4-point analysis where you looked at number of portion of likely served, number of occasions, limited English proficiency community members, access service, the importance of the service to the limited thing available to them, which allows balance meaningful access to community without imposing an undue burden. Originally, I think I had proposed translating everything. Well, that might cause a little bit of an undue burden to our staff and city resources. So I fine-tuned it a little bit more. And that is what you all have before you. Some of the big amendment changes is that I included language that required Spanish translation for our citizen participation. I thought that was critical for people. Alternative language that is most spoken in our community, and that the executive summaries of our consolidation plan and any of our annual action plans also be translated into Spanish, and then all of our public hearing notifications. And then the amendments where we will make translation available, those amendments, the consolidation plan or action plan, and then our paper. So those are the kind of proposed citizen plan language.
Making it easy.
Nice work.
Yeah, well done.
No, so we reviewed that before last month's meeting. I think it's 37 pages.
Oh, the citizen participation.
Yeah. Mhm.
I think you might be talking about the paper,
The caper, sorry.
which was 37 pages.
Yes.
But the citizen participation plan is not a short document either. It's
11
pages.
Not that anyone's counting.
Right.
So,
How do I remember that?
I think we would love right now a motion to approve, if that's okay, the CPP so that we can, it doesn't have to be a long motion, just that you all approve it if you feel comfortable.
I move to approve the CPP with the amendments as proposed.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? All right. We'll go all in favor of the motion. Please raise your hand and I'll do a hand count. Because the only person I can't see is Ian. So Ian.
Ian is continuing to get booted
I am-
off. There's
I
been
am
some
in favor.
traffic. He's
I've
working with
got audio
our
right now.
desk, and we think it might be a Zoom issue. So he may.
Yeah.
Are you there?
Each individual Tapas restaurant has its own.
Just can
Wi-Fi.
hear audio.
Right now. Anyway.
Go to the next tapas place, Ian.
Andy, I can see the virtual hands up and I think we can hear Ian.
We used to.
Yeah, he said he was in favor. I heard him.
Okay.
Okay,
We
thank
be-
you.
We believe you.
all right. It's unanimous in favor. Thank you, Rachel, for all your work on that.
And then I'm gonna scoot over here. So that
Okay.
people on the screen could see me too, if that's, I'm not Allison though.
I'm looking forward to this part of our meeting. And Lynn, I'm going to have you introduce the presenters and kind of the outline of what it's going to look like. And then I think AHAC, we have question and answer after all the presentations. Is that correct? Or after each one?
You all can do it however you want, and maybe we'll lean on the presenters to sort of give us guidance on that, if that's okay.
Sure.
So wanted to first, if it's okay to pull Tyson up on screen, he's our virtual guest, and then David, Ryan, Jesse, come on up and I'll have you all introduce yourself from up here. We need one more chair pulled forward to the table, if that's okay. If all three of you, unless Ryan's gonna hang back.
Come on down, Ryan.
So as they get situated, thanks Tyson for being here virtually as well. You aren't the farthest attendee today, it sounds like, but sometimes you are from Montana. So you all, AHAC, asked council for permission to research revenue options. And this is sort of a continuation of that discussion. Last month, we talked about need in terms of the hardship that folks are facing, and we had the service providers in. There might have been some tears. It was super, super intense meeting, I'd say. Today, I think the purpose is really to discuss possibilities and where we go from here. We know there's a lot of need out there, and we also are very fortunate to have a pretty incredible development community that has partnered with us and will continue to partner with us. And that's really what this panel is supposed to represent. So unfortunately, our finance person had to cancel at the last minute, so we're just sort of rolling with it. That means there's less structure to this conversation than what I was hoping for, but we can bring them forward in the future as well, and have sort of a more specific meeting if you all choose on sort of specific tools. But at this point, talking about revenue generally, panelists, if you all want to talk about specific revenue tools, you are welcome to. If you want to keep it broad, that's fine also. So fortunate today to be joined by 3 entities which represent 4 people. What we have are Tyson and David representing our affordable housing developers, and then Jesse and Ryan really representing market rate housing that can be more affordable potentially, and sort of how do we shape that conversation. So we thought that would be interesting to have sort of perspective from various folks. What I have asked them to do is to start by really discussing the lay of the land in affordability. What are the challenges you're facing in creating affordability, whatever that means to you? How much housing could you create if in some imaginary universe, the city could provide the financing you need? How would additional revenue help you meet your goals or fulfill your mission? And could you build more sustainably? Sort of what I'm loosely referring to as green building with different or additional revenue. And so I have a handful of questions that you all can ask them after the fact if you choose. Some of you are going to be able to follow along with math and potentially do the math for them if you were offered that occasion. Some will be less interested in that. That is fine. They've been warned at least one person here would have a mortgage calculator. That's what did I tell you guys?
Somewhere with it.
Yeah, I know. And that's only a part of why we love you, Matt. So I think specific to affordable folks, really, I thought it would be important for us to dive in on how the market conditions have changed with the state and federal financing picture that's out there through OHCS and the feds. Lift 4%, 9%, like what's changed in the world in the last few years? Because we really haven't done a deep dive check-in on that. How has the Portland or Metro bond affected your ability to obtain funding here? And availability overall? What does leverage do for your application? And are you competitive? What could the city do to help you obtain additional OHCS funding? That's kind of the mix. For Jesse and Ryan, I think, how the existing financing options that you have do, or in your case, I think do not help promote affordability into what some pieces may be within that. And, what having soft financing options from us would look like to you and to your sort of model. And then, I think that's mostly it. So these guys will all introduce themselves, talk through some of what I just put forward. And then at the conclusion, I definitely want to hear from all of you on the committee about what else you need to know or want to know about sort of where we are, thoughts, et cetera, and we'll figure out where to take this discussion from here. So with that, does anybody have time consideration sort of on the tail end of this? Anybody need to be out of here by a certain point? Are we good for, okay. I do want to make sure we wrap up with enough time for staff report. But with that, how about if we start with David, is that okay? Sort of introducing yourself and talking through some of what I just said, and then let these guys know if you would like them to ask you questions, as you go or not, whatever is up to you.
Whatever you guys are comfortable. If you want to ask questions, if something comes up and you want me to answer something, I can always go back to what I'm going to say. I don't have any prepared remarks or PowerPoint. So I think when you said, what's happened to the sort of environment for subsidies, I think the answer is nothing. The problem is the environment for everything else, including rents, land costs, construction, has gone crazy. So what used to fund, maybe 1,000 units a year only funds 750 or 600. And so what we're seeing, I think, statewide is the number of below market rate units produced every year is going down fairly steadily, and probably will continue to go down at least for the next 2, maybe 3 years. And the reason for all this is that there are really only 2 programs that fund below market rate housing in Oregon. And they're both the tax credits. There's a 4% and there's a 9%. Both of those are not indexed, or neither of them are indexed, meaning that they're essentially a fixed amount of credit available per year, and they're set by per capita. So there is a little bit of growth because Oregon's growing 1% or 2% a year, but there is no growth just because costs are up. I think for 9%, it's like $3.80 per person in the state of Oregon. So, and that funds about less than 1,000 units a year statewide. The other program is the 4% program. The credits are unlimited, but there's what's called the 50% test, meaning that you have to have private activity bond funding that at least equals the amount of credit that you're asking for. Private activity bonds are also per capita metered nationwide, and so they go up 2% a year too, just like the credits. So the amount of subsidy available federally is capped, or is essentially capped for us. It goes like, say, tiny % growth every year. The state bonds that it calls its LIFT program, they are also a fixed amount because you have to go to the legislature every biennium and ask for permission to sell bonds. But they have the same problem in the sense that maybe they sell $100 million of bonds, but that pays for a lot less than it did 2 years ago. And so what's happening is it's becoming far more competitive to actually get funds. I think we had a round this year that was LIFT for rural affordable, and I think they were able to fund 3 or 4 projects, and they had almost 30 apply. So most people didn't get funded. Didn't used to be the case years ago.
Harvey, where are you?
Maybe even
come here. Hey, come here. I
days.
know there's a buddy. Come here.
And so what
Good
we're
girl. Good girl, Harv.
That is.
I know. Huh?
Hearing somebody talk to a dog or something.
Counselor Campbell, could you mute, please?
Oh no. I'm so sorry, you guys.
I know, I couldn't tell, like, who's watching YouTube videos back there.
That's a wicked tapas bar.
Oh.
Let's play
Shirts and say blame me in.
So I think what I'm seeing statewide is that local governments are starting to step up with local subsidies. Because especially for the LIFT program, you get points for asking for the smallest subsidy that you can ask for. So that sort of the more leverage you have for budget, the more likely you're going to be able to attract or compete with those LIFT funds. And for example, the last 4 funds or 4 projects that we got funded, 3 out of the 4 had at least $2 million of local subsidy.
How much? 2 or 10? Okay, but you said 10 million. I'm like,
I don't know. And the one that didn't get any local subsidy was in Prineville, and I think we got kind of lucky with that one. It was early on and before things got really crazy. These days, if we can't attract local funding, we'll still apply, but I mean, the chances of us we're going to be down in the 15 out of the 30, we won't even be in the top 5. And so you have the Portland metro region and the city of Portland that have 2 sets of bonds. And so their projects have kind of jumped up to the front of the line because they have so much local subsidy. Folks using ARPA grant money, which is now gone, but that we had 2 of our projects that we got funded. We had lots of ARPA grants. And so without that kind of fairly sizable local subsidy, we're just not competitive with those folks that bring in whatever it is, urban renewal, whatever source of local funding is available.
Thanks.
thank you. I just wanted to put out a reminder, if there's anyone attending the meeting that has any public comment, we'll look for your hands to be raised because there's no one. Okay. I just wanted to put it out there. Thanks for checking. Okay.
So can I just ask a
Yes,
curious thing?
absolutely.
So programs like our SDC program are really helpful then. They're helping us.
Well, they help. I mean, they're not $2 million worth of help, but yeah, I mean, the problem is that everybody's giving SDC waivers statewide now. I mean, almost every jurisdiction waives off, below market rate deed restricted projects from SDCs. A lot of jurisdictions now have construction excise taxes, some of them more than what Ben charges. So, what really helps are those really big chunks of money where they can award $2-3 million to a project that, make the leverage such that the asking is very competitive.
I see.
Yeah, Kathy.
Do you think moving forward, our tax increment financing district in the central core might be helpful? I mean, it's a redevelopment. Yeah.
Eventually. It's earning money pretty slowly, but yeah, eventually.
Mm-hmm.
That question popped in my head, so thanks for asking it. Any questions over here? Thank you, David.
And we can't see the members online, so Dina, maybe if you don't mind keeping an eye out. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. So with that, thank you, David. If you don't mind hanging out in case other questions come up. Tyson, do you mind going next? Is that okay? And talking about land and
yep. That would be great. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
Barely.
You're a little quiet.
Barely. I'm usually a really loud talker, and I have my partner in the bullpen with me right now. So I warned him that I may talk loud. Is that still okay or still too quiet?
Better. Good.
Okay. I'm going to talk really loud, Brett. Okay.
What's happening?
So thank you, everybody. I'm Tyson O'Connell. I know some of you, I don't know everybody. Thanks for having me here today. I really appreciate it. Y'all have a really hard job, and all of us in affordable housing have a hard job right now, but in your particular shoes in Bend, Oregon, it's tough. We operate, I'm in Missoula, Montana. We're having some of the same issues that Bend is having, and we operate across the country in different markets. And Bend is a place where I want to do more business, and it's a dynamic, growing economy, but it's a hard place to solve this issue. And you've got people moving in faster than you can build affordable housing for a number of reasons. So I just want to thank everybody for listening to us and having us here. And David did a really good job. I mean, it's literally like many of the same notes that I have that I would be saying. And I'm going to reiterate some of those things so everybody understands. And then I'm going to kind of give some real life examples. And I'd be happy to crunch some numbers with the mortgage calculator with Matt, if that's what he wants to do, because I do this all day in all different places. And it's not that I don't, and our company doesn't want to do more projects. It's that they're really hard. So I'll just give a really brief summary. Wish Camper Development Partners has been doing affordable housing for over 40 years. And it's kind of runs together, but 4 or 5 years ago, Margaret Salazar was running OHCS, and she asked a number of national developers to come and do a roundtable to ask Oregon, how can we better use our 4% credits? Because the writing was on the wall that we needed to produce more affordable housing. And some people stayed and some didn't stay. We've stayed, and we've done 4 or 5 or 6 projects across Oregon in different markets. And we really like a lot of it, but the challenges that are not just unique to Oregon and not unique to Bend is things have gotten so much more expensive. And David alluded to that. You have a fixed pool of money that can subsidize affordable housing, because you can't do it without a subsidy. And just in the last 2 years, we're doing a project for those of you, most of you know, but we're doing a project called Stillwater Crossing on the south side of Bend. It has 240 units. And we started that 2 years ago. And so we actually bid it out 2.5 years ago. And construction prices right now to do that exact same project with the same subs would be 20 to 30% higher. And I think a lot of people hear that and they hear talking heads say stuff like that. That project, it would cost $15 million more to build that project. So that's a real live project that I would love to do more of those in Bend. I know it's a big, it's helping with the affordable housing supply in Bend, but it's $15 million more. So, okay, we're developers. Let's figure out how to do that. At the same time, interest rates are going up, and a lot of people hear that and they think, wow, it's costing more to borrow money. Well, what that means is you can't borrow as much money, right? Because on an affordable housing project, your NOI, the amount of money that project's going to generate, is fixed. And rents have gone up in Bend, of course, but at the same time, interest rates have almost doubled from what we closed at 2 years ago. So we could borrow $8 million less. And I ran these numbers, and I'm rounding, but it's pretty dang close. $15 million more, $8 million less. So that's a $23 million gap on one single project. And so when David says there's 30 different people, 30 projects that are applying and only 4 or 5 get awards, those are 30 great projects. And all of them are having, depending on scale, are having similar type issues like this. There's been one thing that's helped 4% credits during that time is the 4% credit got fixed. And that was a lifeline for our Stillwater project. It adds about $5 million in tax credit equity to the project, and that's phenomenal. And in that case, it really helped us in addition to some other funding we got from the state. But to do that deal now, even with that $5 million increase, you still got a $17 million gap. That's what we call it, the gap. So this is one single project, and it's just me telling everyone the real numbers. There's 30 different ones. There's developers all over that are trying to do things. And the reality is every different city is struggling with this in a different way. And they're clawing and fighting to try to get the limited pool of soft money, which is primarily LIFT, as David described. There are other funds as well, but they're trying to get those so that they can make projects work. And when you have something like Metro bond funding, which we used in our Beaverton project, if that takes you to the front of the line, on this scoring system that's supposed to be objective, that's a huge advantage. And you're not gonna, if you're not in that top 5, you're not gonna get awards. And so we all structure our projects to try to make them competitive, but that's a reality that we're all facing. I think there's also a subjective part of that, in that even though it's supposed to be objective scoring, and it is, and it's fair, there's another part that just says, boy, if we're the state, or Oregon Housing, or if we're another entity that's going to put money into this project and try to help Bend, what kind of skin do they have in the game, and how substantial is it? And that's something that it can't be exactly quantified, but it happens. And I think the conditions that David described for the scoring and for the fixed funds are exactly accurate. And I would have said almost the same thing. But I just wanted to put some of those out there. There's another issue that people are seeing, and it's harder to build projects. Just the practical part is harder. And I spend many parts of my days trying to figure out, it's almost like I've forgotten how to do things that I was able to do. Like I have amnesia, and everybody on our project teams and the contractors and all the different people, subs, they all seem to have that. And it's like, we didn't all forget how to do things. It just became harder to do things. And it became harder because of many different market conditions that few of us could see. And Bend is not immune to that either. And it may be a little extreme in Bend because of the quickness that the growth is happening and the supply of labor that's also in the market. So that's another thing that it's not just people whining, it's harder. Projects are taking longer. That's part of the reason why they're more expensive, but it may take 6 to 12 months longer to build a project than it did 3 years ago. And like I said, it has me pulling out my hair sometimes thinking, why did I forget? Or why is this happening like this? So those are some real life numbers. I did take a note, which I wasn't going to speak specifically to this, but the SDCs are not just a rounding error, even on these big projects. They may not be the biggest piece of the funding, but these projects are so razor thin right now. In order to even make it so you can attract an investor and get a developer fee paid back over the 15-year period, which is what they require, that SDC waiver may be just the amount that pushes it over the edge. I mean, it's a huge thing, and many other municipalities do that, but it's still a greatly appreciated thing. And I really support that, and I support not having a unit waiver on it, because if you're only getting a partial part of that, but you're creating more units in a single project, I don't think you should be penalized for that.
Thank you, Tyson. We have a couple of questions. I have a question, if you could, and then you can take it next. I don't want to forget my question.
Okay.
And you might have to back up a little bit. What do you mean when you say the 4% got fixed? Do you mean the fixed rate, or it got fixed in a policy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I acted like I was speaking on an affordable housing panel to tax credit investors. What happened is when we closed Bend, it's called a 4% credit, but the actual investment rate that credit was yielding was 3.1%. So we elected to float that credit and not lock it when we closed. And then we got super lucky, and a policy move that affordable housing developers had been working on for decades got slipped into either ARPA or one of these relief funds, and they raised the rate of that so that it was actually fixed at 4%. The 9% credit's fixed at 9. This is fixed at 4, but it was only yielding 3.1, and that added $5 million right to that project, right to Stillwater at a time when we really needed it.
Wow.
We had to go through a new closing with Oregon Housing. We had to issue new bonds. It was a 6-month process, but it was a lifeline. Now, if you do a new deal, that 4% credit is fixed. So when I said that do Stillwater again right now, you'd have $5 million more in tax credit equity. You would, because the tax credits are worth more. The problem is it's only worth $5 million more, and the cost to do the project is $15 million more.
Right.
And then you can only borrow $8 million less. So that's
Right.
where the $17 million gap happens.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Mhm.
asking
Yeah,
that, because I
Kathy.
didn't realize that either. There's been some discussion about asking our city council to consider a housing bond here in Bend. I don't know if we're getting any update from the city on that or where that's at, but I was wondering if the city did pass a housing bond, would that be something that would help?
Absolutely, it would help. I mean, definitely it would help. It would be utilized in Bend on real life projects, and the bigger the bond and the more it could support projects, the more it would help. It would have a huge help. There's no doubt.
Is there a size of a bond that you could envision would actually work as opposed to just being, wishing it would help? Is there a number that would be more realistic to generally help?
I don't know how to answer it. I'll say on our Beaverton project, we got $9.8 million in Metro bonds on one project. So the amount of the total bond, that's a political question, and it's how much revenue you can generate, but that's another real actual project with a number in it.
Well, that's helpful. I mean, just to get some sense of scale. So thank you.
So the Metro bond was $600 million bond.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
But that was the Metro Portland.
Right.
Right.
You probably, $1 billion probably would be a nice size here in Bend.
Helpful.
So Elizabeth, jump on if I go overboard here. I was just going to say, and Dina, I'll need you to look for her waving arms or face popping up. I think when we scoped the transportation bond, really the way that happened from a big picture, in my understanding, was the city really listed our full sort of need for improvements that weren't going to be covered. And then we put in sort of all of the SDCs generate a CIP list, right? Capital improvement project, and kind of like did the math within that to come up with a number, and then polled to figure out what the number was that folks would say yes to at the ballot. So it's a little bit different. There's the political element, and there's also sort of the need element. If you all decided to recommend in some future time to council that they should consider exploring a housing revenue or housing bond, at that point, probably other staff would take over that work, determining with sort of our technical expertise, what the needs are, what the production was that council wanted to achieve, et cetera, and then do polling on what folks would actually say yes to. So that's a tough question, though I do appreciate it because there's a lot of different layers to it. So.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And I know we had mentioned a few months ago that maybe that's something that should be considered. And I just didn't know where that idea is at the city. But hearing these comments about how important the bond has been, and given everything else that's going on, and especially all of what we've just heard, this testimony about the gaps, I think it's something that we should be talking about and moving forward with.
I had to stop nodding there for a quick second because I need to be neutral if we talk about certain revenue things, but for understanding, that is exactly it. Tyson, I actually wanted to ask you a question about 4% tax credits and the availability of that. When you were called into Oregon by Margaret to come and sort of workshop 4%, I feel like it was a very different lay of the land than it is now. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I can. So Margaret came from HUD, and she was savvy enough to realize we have an underutilized 4% tax credit in Oregon that you get a certain amount every year, and it's a big amount. David, you probably know exactly what it is. But you get a certain amount every year as a state, and that's a federal subsidy tax credit that each state gets, and they were not utilizing very much of it. And over the last few years, because of the extra bonds that have been passed, because of the extra resources statewide in Oregon, developers, local and national and regional, have come in and started competing. And so now that 4% credit, which is $300 million or $400 million a year or something huge, is actually starting to be limited, and they're running out of it. I will say from my experience, so I guess on one sense, Margaret did great and she got people there. And then on another sense, you had a limited resource. Once you get people there and creative people are starting to think how to use it, it started to run out. it's been a pretty big issue with OHCS over the last 6 to 8 months. I know some of you can speak to it. I remember talking with Keith about it many months ago because I knew that it was running out, and he said, wow, we just had this meeting and found out it was running out. I've been in other states where this has happened, numerous states that are utilizing all the federal 4% credits they have for the year. And it's actually a good position to be in as a state, because that means you're utilizing the most that you can. And it's kind of taken care of itself. I mean, I wish it was unlimited, but it's not as, and it's going to take care of itself now because of the market conditions, where some of these projects that OHCS has allocated credits to in a pipeline and has them penciled in are not going to happen. It's because of the conditions I just mentioned. That's just the reality. And so it is an issue, Lynn, and I think it's something that everyone should be thinking about, but it's not something Bend has any control over, other than to know if you're utilizing all of it and only 20 projects can be built a year and you're running out of 4% credits, then only 20 projects are going to be built. But some of that can be handled through, it's almost like it becomes competitive, like in Minnesota, but it's mostly, it opens up on January 1st. People are ready to do it. If you don't get them that year, you've still kind of got your project in the pipeline and you put it in the next year. I think Oregon is struggling with that, but they're going to figure something out related to that.
So Tyson thinks that was part of what I wanted to get to, which is the fact that this 4% tax credit that historically has not been competitive is becoming competitive because we have oversubscribed it. And so my next question for you, David, Keith, whoever wants to answer it is, does that lead to sort of additional needs from the city or other municipalities in stepping up in different ways? Does that change the revenue discussion in any way? Like how do those things come together, if that makes sense? Now that 4% is less available and becoming competitive, what do you need from us?
Well, it becomes a need for gap funds, right?
Yeah.
So, and just sort of a way to talk about how bad things have gotten. So I think starting about a year ago, OHCS realized that it oversubscribed to 4%, and all these projects were seeing these huge cost increases. So they went to the E-board and got $50 million of what they call a market cost offset fund. It was gone in 90 days, and it still didn't bail out all the projects that are underwater currently. So I think Tyson's right. I mean, there's some that just aren't going to be able to survive. And OHS has been, really trying to keep them, afloat and get them across the finish line, but it's really not possible. There's not enough resource to do that. With these sources essentially capped, the only source to sort of make projects that are getting too expensive to work is to look for other sources of fund, and local government's really the only place to look for that.
There's one other challenge that's unique to Bend, as opposed to many markets where we work, and that's that Bend doesn't have any difficult to develop areas or qualified census tract areas, which make a tax credit, they increase the basis and they make a tax credit more valuable. And I know Lynn is working on trying to advocate for getting some. It's a pretty, in my opinion, in my experience, a pretty black and white in most cases where someone, I don't even know where, some federal person somewhere in an office somewhere makes these decisions based off of data that they're gathering. And as a result, it makes it harder to do projects, where in many markets, we can do a project right here because it's in a QCT, and you go literally across the street, Main Street, and you can't do a project on the other side of the street because you're not in a QCT. So there's a huge value to having a QCT or DDA, and Bend doesn't, to my knowledge, they don't have any right now. You could correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that's just a market condition that is another challenge for Bend.
Yeah, and QCTs, my understanding is, are developed by that person in the office in DC or who knows where, maybe in New Jersey. I have no idea. They do that thing. The DDA is difficult to develop area, is a little more subjective. And so that's what I've been pushing. And of course, the state has not listened to me when I've said all of Bend is a difficult to develop area. but we'll keep working on it in smaller chunks. So
QCP stand for?
qualified census tract, and it has to do with income levels for the most part.
Would a train running through the middle of the city help to identify difficult sites to develop?
So what the data, so Cindy actually helped me with some of the info when we were going for this before. We looked at, I was looking at what our pipeline looked like and where projects were going to land that were likely to need tax credits. And so Simpson parcel was one of them. We looked at the Southeast area and DSL. We looked at different things like that and kind of sliced and diced based on census tracts. What are the incomes? You know, how many low income folks live here? What are the market conditions? And so, you know, in the Simpson tract, for instance, the home sale prices in that area are very high and there's very little poverty. And so that to me was one of the factors that we tried to put forward to the state. And so it really has to do with sort of that mix of people. And the idea with DDAs, in my understanding, and I could be totally missing, but it's, you know, let's put the affordable housing in higher earning census tracts so that people have a better shot at moving forward and earning more from these developments and communities. So that's sort of the idea. But I think the state is somewhat receptive. They understand the unique challenges of developing in Bend to some degree. But we haven't had a project yet that we have been able to really go all the way through that process with. So still working on it. We'll see.
Matt.
Tyson, also David, can you guys speak to any, for lack of a better word, cool things that you're seeing across other areas that you're working in? Since we're obviously in kind of a brainstorming mode for additional assistance, subsidies, et cetera. Have you seen anything out there, whether it's across the nation or across the state, that maybe would be a nice to have here locally in the Bend market?
I mean, I've seen a lot of level of effort increases over the last couple of years with, you know, more and more jurisdictions that finally got the sort of fact that they have a housing crisis. And so they're starting to do super aggressive zoning kind of changes to add more density, more flexibility, you know, waive parking standards, things like that. And some of them are looking at local revenue sources, not as many because, you know, cities need money to do everything else, not just subsidize affordable housing. So, but just the level of attention, level of effort, just over the last three or so years. You know, people are just taking it seriously now. I don't think, you know, 5 years ago they didn't. Certainly, you know, coming out of the Great Recession, nobody took affordable housing seriously because there was a ton of it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I would say there's all these tools that communities can use, and the reality is Bend has used a lot of them. Bend has a real estate tax exemption for affordable housing. They have SDC waivers. Again, these are things that just help move the needle and just typically put it right over the edge. You have, you know, you're trying to do this. At some point, you've utilized a lot of the tools that you can, and even Oregon now on where you can put affordable housing on commercially zoned land. So now it's just becoming a matter of we need more funding because Bend has done a lot of the cool things. I will say making it easier to build is another thing you hear talking heads say all the time. It makes a huge difference. Time kills projects. It really kills projects right now because interest rates are rising and so far construction prices aren't going down. And so the longer it takes to get to the point where you can close on your financing and break ground, the worse it is. The longer it takes to build projects, the worse it is. So those are things that Bend has a fast track in my experience, which is limited to one single project, but it worked really well. And I think that's something that it's not a direct subsidy, but it makes a huge difference in a rising interest rate environment. So making it easier to build things is really important.
Are you in a rising interest rate environment? Are you starting to see some of the funding sources, especially with the I want to call it recent refocus on CRA for banks? Are you starting to see any creative funding options come from the corporate side of things at all?
I haven't.
Yeah, I haven't really either. I think people are circling their, it's kind of scary right now, actually, what a lot of banks are doing and bigger national companies they're kind of circling the wagons and figuring out how scary it's going to get over the next 12 to 24 months. And that's a strange position to be in the middle of all of these other issues in the housing crisis we're in.
Yeah, and I would reemphasize what Tyson said about, if we perform our projects, and maybe 2 months later, we'll go back to the bank and the bank will say, oh, our interest rate's up, 1.5. That can wipe out your entire, you're underwater when that happens. And so, planning staff oftentimes, well, they operate on a little different kind of schedule than developers do, especially in this kind of market. So
That was very diplomatic.
yeah.
Diplomatic.
It takes them, 2 months to get a decision. Oftentimes by the time they come back to give you a decision, it's like, doesn't matter at this point because the project doesn't pencil anymore, right? So that sort of, let's get it done, try to solve problems. If this kind of affordable housing is a priority, make it a priority. Understanding that the delay, the extra, silly rule. I guess in my book they're silly, but in the planner's book they're absolutely necessary to produce. But more flexibility and more speed definitely will save some of these projects. Otherwise, if they're delayed, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board.
With that, if it's okay, I'd love to segue first, and because I'm an opportunist, talk about the potential of having Matt talk about CRA at some point in the future. So I'm just going to note that for now. But we'll come back to that in a future meeting, maybe, or somebody else. I don't know who. And hand it off, if it's okay, to Jesse and Ryan. You two are semi-new to this group, so if you don't mind introducing yourselves and what you do, and then launch into whatever you're going to say. Tyson, please stick around if you're able to. And then I do know that we have a couple hands online. We will come back to those momentarily. It looks like Barb is maybe one of them. So Barb, because you're a counselor, we'll come to you first when we come back around, if that's okay. So go ahead, take your lead.
My name is Jesse Russell. This is Ryan, my partner at Lighthouse, which is a development and construction business here in Bend. We started about 7 years ago. And I'm from Bend. I came back to Bend and wasn't able to afford a house at that time, and kind of saw, launched into the affordable housing crisis we're having now. For us, we're more looking at the workforce housing and the middle income housing. And for our first development, the idea was we wanted to be able to build a market rate, low case A affordable house. We thought if we built them small enough that they would by their nature be affordable for someone in our community. We did all right with that. Our first development was 22 houses. They were right around 500 square feet. And the first one sold for about 230,000, and the last one was like 325 or something. But since then, those have resold, and some of them have resold for as high as 400 and up. So our attempt to do that didn't work. We have since teamed up with Core Land Trust here in town, because the big problem that we see, which is reiterated by probably every developer, is the land. The cost of the land is really expensive. It's impossible to get debt on if you want to take that risk. So Ryan and I started a construction fund so that we were able to purchase our land with equity. So any of our projects, the dirt is paid for with equity. So the ticking clock that starts to happen only affects the return to those investors. Once we have the lots finished, we bring on traditional construction debt, and then we finish and then sell the homes. The environment is really changing now for trying to raise money for that. We've been pretty successful. We have 4 projects that are going right now that are in our fund, and we own all of our land outright. But as we move into what's going to happen in the next 12 or 24 months, I think raising money to be able to buy the land is going to become more difficult. And then getting debt on the land is going to be, or getting debt across the board is going to become more expensive. So we did, Ryan made up this pro forma, And what we did is we just kind of took a 10 house, a theoretical 10 house subdivision that we would do. It's based on the core project that we're doing. We have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's about 300 square feet that we're building for them. Our hard costs on that are about $200,000 for the house. Core obviously brings the land in. So, and then those houses are deed restricted. So we just wanted to run a scenario to kind of show you what it would look like if someone like the city or someone was able to come in and help us in that really beginning part of the development with the purchase of the dirt. So I'll have Ryan kind of take you through.
Howdy. All right, everybody ready to go to developer school for a minute? Okay, so this is why housing is so expensive. So let's run through a project, just a market project. Both of the sides of this are the same project. I'll describe why I did two versions of it in just a minute. Okay, so we've got four columns here. We'll start on the left and go through it, and then I'll describe the differences in the columns and kind of some suggestions around the soft financing idea. Okay, so this is a hypothetical but fairly typical market rate project. So the headline is we end up selling these homes for $725,000, which is the median home price in Bend right now. So that makes it a really great kind of project to practice on. So we buy a piece of land, let's say it's about a half acre for $825,000. Our cost then on that land, we have to demo the existing home. We have to pay $80,000 in entitlements. That is engineering fees, building permits on the horizontal, et cetera. Then we do the horizontal. What we mean by horizontal is like the infrastructure. So pipes, utilities, sewer, streets, sidewalks, everything prior to the foundation getting poured. We call the foundation and up the vertical. Then a contingency line item because there's a lot of surprise costs through the land piece. So we end up total cost to get finished lots here at 1.573 million. Let's round up to 1.6 million. So we've got 10 lots now that are, recorded, platted, 10 lots, and it took us $1.6 million to get that. Right now, we go and raise that $1.6 million from investors, from private investors. In order to attract their money, we have to show them a pro forma like this, where at the end of this thing, they earn about 21%. That's a 21% annualized IRR. That accounts for the risk that if things don't go right, they lose their money. Or if this thing is delayed by a year, that ends up being 15 or 12 or something. And so we have to, in order to get that 1.6 million from normal investors. And for our fund, about 75% of our fund, we have about 50 investors in our investment fund. 3/4 of them are local to Bend. So we're raising money from us, like it's, people that are all around. So this is not like big bad Wall Street people that we can tell them they should make less money. It's people that live here. That's the cost capital. It was a great segue to talk about like how the delay doesn't matter to maybe the person reviewing it, but it matters a lot to the developer. I was going to jump up there. So if skip for a second down to the bottom of that first column, I have this little headline that says cost of capital comparison. So the daily cost of that capital for that $1.6 million is $900. So that costs us as developers $900 a day. So every day that goes by, every day that something doesn't get reviewed, every day that there's a delay, it's almost $1,000. And we pay that for 1,280 days on a typical project. It's just a horrendous amount of money.
And I know that time sounds like because you'll hear people say it takes about a year to develop the land, but what's included in this is these delays that will happen. It's us raising the money too. Sometimes we delay ourselves because we still have money that needs to come in, but this is only our experience and the time that it has taken us, but over 3 projects that we've done.
Yeah, so that's the timing. So Jumping in, so just our estimates here. So construction, 2.2 million, so that's 220,000 a home. That would be a pretty tight build given costs right now, but let's pretend we can do it. General contractor fee, we get a loan for the 2.2 million to build the 10 homes. So we pay about $200,000 in financing costs on that loan. And then we run through our waterfall when we sell those 10 homes. So we sell those 10 homes at $725,000 each. We have to pay transaction fees. That's basically listing buyers and sellers agents. Developer fee, that's our income, like our company's income as developers. We pay off our construction loan. And then there's kind of a gross proceeds. Now out of that, we have to give the investors back their 1.6 million. And then there's a project net income. There's splits on that where that goes between the developer and the investors. And so the investors basically have their 1.6 million tied up for 3.5 years or whatever. And then they earn their profit split on that. That's how they generate, a 20 something targeted IRR. So that home at 725,000, if you put 20% down at a 5% interest rate, this is down at the very bottom of that column, your mortgage is $3,114 a month. At 33% of somebody's income, they would have to earn $113,000 a year for a household of 3 or a household of 4. So that's 140% AMI household. So that would be affordable to 140% AMI household. I use 33. I think that's a little bit of a rule of thumb. That's just the mortgage too. That's not your utilities and insurance and everything. So that typically goes like 36 to 40, I think. So cool. So that is a typical market rate project. That's one of the reasons homes are $725,000. Now, how in just a little microcosm could the city help around this idea of soft financing? So I have 3 different ideas here. And this is the next 3 columns. So the first is if the city had capital, or if there was a fund of capital that provided, for example, 90% of the acquisition costs for that land during the entitlement period. So it's very difficult and very dangerous to get debt during the entitlement period. And so if we had a friendly partner that wasn't going to ruin our lives if things didn't go well, which is what normal debt on land is, it's either impossible to get or it's very risky. And so, for example, if the city came in, put in 740,000 at close, and then just carried it for 2 years at, I think I have 4 or 5% interest in here, which is the $74,000. And so then we as developers, we go raise the other 830,000. So we're paying for everything else. And, but our daily cost of capital, if you jump down to the bottom, is almost half. It's $474 a day instead of $900 a day. Still 1,280 days, the project still takes a long time, but at least through that period, we had a loan on the land. So it reduced our amount of capital that we had to raise from investors in order to take down the land. That would allow us to be able to sell those homes, all other things being equal, at 610,000. And so, kind of a big jump down, 725 to 610, that's now affordable for a family of 4 at the 118% AMI income level. So maybe we're getting close. Then kind of the next 2 columns are, what if that 24-month entitlement timeline was no longer 24 months, but was 6, because time is money. And so if by being part of this program, our project got fast-tracked in approvals and we could get through that in 6 months, like now as a developer, you're talking our love language, go fast. So we can run through the same project, but the headline is we could basically sell this home at 580,000. It's the same in the sense that the city comes in, 742,000 at close. City's only holding that loan for 6 months, not 24. So the city can turn its capital a lot faster. Great, more projects. And so, but by being able to turn that project around and shorten that timeline to 730 days, we can get a home that's less. So the home price comes down a little bit more. Then the last idea, and if anybody asked my opinion, I'd say I'd love somebody to offer both of these programs. Program one is, kind of senior financing at 90% of acquisition cost on dirt. We'll hold it through entitlements, pay it back when you get a construction loan, take us out. Or the other debt or the other source of financing that's really hard to get is what I call sub debt or subordinate debt. So what if this program came in and said, all right, the city's going to lend you 30% of your acquisition cost at closing, and we're going to go subordinate to a bridge lender. Could be a bank, it could be another private lender. What that would mean is we get $250,000 from the city, we get $577 from a bridge lender. The bridge lender looks at the city's money and counts it as equity. That's like the 30% down payment, even though it's debt. We as the developers still pay for everything else. So we still put $750,000 in. And then, but the city has their $250,000 that stays in through entitlements and then stays in for construction. So it stays in longer because then when we go and get a construction loan, we don't have to basically pay that off and get a huge construction loan at a more expensive interest rate. The city stays in subordinate all the way through the project, is paid off as the homes sell, 3 years later or whatever. This would still be part of our super program where we go super fast and it's, approved in 6 months. These are of course hypothetical examples. And so a program like that reduces daily cost of capital. So again, kind of all things being equal, we can sell that home for $575,000, which is affordable for somebody at that 112% of AMI. So that's the model. Now, if you flip this over, I'll just describe this. You can look at all the numbers later. I just reran the same thing, pretending that the land is now $550,000 instead of $825,000. And this is where you can get the homes down to like, $500,000 price point, $530,000. In order to do that, $550,000 is not really market rate right now. So there would need to be some other program of assistance that bought that down or sold land for cheap or something. But when you start to plug numbers in to get your land down, all other things being equal, that's where you start getting housing sub 500,000 or sub 500,000. So
building Metolius.
Over.
Jeez, man. So that's the model, and those are kind of the suggestions. So the program, for example, from a developer standpoint, if I'm saying, hey, do you want to incentivize us to build, homes for at $575,000? What kind of financing would you guys need in just a really simple way? We're not controlling construction costs or anything. If we could have help taking down the land at this kind of 4, 5, 6% interest rate on some kind of hold period, that makes a pretty big impact. And, I think we do projects like that. Questions?
So I know I have like 1,000 questions, but we only have so much time and my head is full. Matt's head's full. Let's do some quick questions. Yes.
The land trust model, how does that impact this?
Like when you work with CORE?
Well, it's the same. And those are deed restricted houses too, which I think talking with Lynn, we'd have to restrict these in some way too, because it's really the market.
Right.
So with CORE, we're just the general contractor for them. So we give them our design. We work with another architect to engineer that design, and they're developing the land, and then we'll just build the houses on it.
I see. I guess I was wondering if there was a city land trust that was taking the place of not working with CORE, but if the land was, some of the manipulation of the land costs had to do more with the city being a land trust or creating a land trust, would that make a difference?
Yeah, it would. So the land trust model that we've done with CORE is they have their own financing mechanisms, which is state and donations and. But they come in, they buy the land. They pay for the entitlements, they pay for the horizontal. They hire us to build our homes as a general contractor and they pay us as a general contractor, but there's no investors that are putting in equity and generating a yield. And also that whole piece of the puzzle is removed. That home then is deed restricted forever. The buyer doesn't participate in the run up of appreciation. It's locked. That's okay. They then turn and sell it 5 years later, 20 years later to somebody else. This is a little bit more related to how do you create a financing mechanism to make what would otherwise be kind of, 150% AMI housing and bring it to 120 or 100 or something just through financing. Now, maybe you do deed restrict these for some period of time to the buyer. Otherwise, the person that buys this home at 575 turns it 2 years later at 900.
That's my hand.
Yeah, exactly. Where that is.
Yeah, I've worked with cities that do that. This is really valuable. Thank you so much.
Matt, did you have a question?
Well, no, I was just going to say that exactly. You could build a $610,000 house and sell it for 610, assuming that the market didn't dictate 850 at that time and greed got out of the way, right? But then what would stop somebody from buying it at 610, even though it's worth 800, holding it for 2 years for capital gains and then dumping it? And then all of a sudden you've lost your affordable home. And sure, the city has funded something for 2 years, but that's not a.
So if I could interject really quickly, this is stealing a little bit of thunder from my staff report that's coming, but we have 2 open positions right now in the housing department, one of which is a middle income housing coordinator. And so the idea is bringing this person on to work with folks like Jesse and Ryan and talk about that. What feels fair, what's appropriate to restrict this house or restrict the future equity. And because it's a different world, like the financing that David and Keith and Tyson pull together is not a comfortable place for most of the rest of the development community. It's just crazy. There's a lot of rules, there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of work to get there. So what are the trade-offs that we do for that middle income sector to continue to preserve affordability, for some period of time? It might not be 60 years, I don't know, and still sort of get what we want to out of that. So that's sort of what this new person will come on and do, I think, in working with folks like this to try to figure those terms out. I don't know that we have the answer to that yet. What does that look like? What would a covenant scheme look like? What is the length of time that we would restrict it, et cetera? But those are all things that are very much on the horizon in the near term to try to figure out and work with folks to get to. So
I love the idea. It's just the what ifs, right?
Some of the theme is just getting inventory out there.
Yeah.
And the more inventory we can get on the ground, the better, is the first problem, I think. And so, and I know this is not a middle income housing
Supply and demand,
committee, right? But a lot of what Ben's done has been incredible. We have a small unit development code, we have a micro apartment code, we have 2 cottage codes. We've scaled our SDCs. There's a lot that's has already been done that I think is helping. And you're seeing, Hayden is building cottages. It's not just this small little thing anymore. There's a lot of inventory coming. So hopefully that's helpful, just the inventory part.
Just needs to come quicker.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. And I think that the amount of time that it takes to do this stuff is ridiculous. And there's a lot of common sense that I think is being overlooked with this. I think our city does a pretty incredible job as far as the staff goes, but there's just a miscommunication sometimes on projects that and they're overwhelmed, right? They've been overwhelmed for years now. To be able to communicate when you're about to put in a construction document with the engineers and sit down and talk to them about what is going on instead of playing a game of telephone is really helpful. Well, the engineering department now they're trying to do this thing where we can do that. So I think the solutions are coming and the city's working really hard to do that. And if we see a slowdown, maybe that'll be helpful. Let's not stop hiring people at the city because we think things are going to slow down. I think that was a bad idea.
Yeah. Start the circle all over again.
Right.
Exactly. Well, then when you mentioned there's risk with the land, I've been a realtor here for 26 years. And in 2008, 2009, lots in Bend were $20,000.
Yeah.
And people, they went down 80%. and homes were affordable, but no one could get loans. Banks weren't lending. And so I kind of had like a mini heart attack thinking, okay, you get this land and in 3 years the market crashes and then you can't build, the people lose their I mean, it's just, that's where my brain went, was markets don't always go up. And being, I mean, I know you are aware of what's going on. I think you have a project that I run by all the time on Norton that I can't wait to see. I might get online and try to sneak peek, but
It's not true.
okay. Yeah, but just, you know, markets don't always go up.
Well, yeah, they don't. And so that's why, you know, to a couple of comments on that, that's why the equity investors need, like, you gotta be able to generate a decent yield for them, because they're gonna, if they investing in projects long enough like this, they're gonna lose all their money.
Right. Right.
That's one. The other is you'll leverage it levers, as it's called, gains and losses. And so if you have highly levered land, and the market dips just a little bit, it can wipe out your equity pretty quickly and you go to zero. And so again, kind of like a nod to our structure, when we created our fund 2 years ago, we buy our land and we go through our entitlements. We do all that in cash. So we raise money from investors, we pay for it in cash, because we don't want to take the personal risk and of ourselves, because we have to sign on loans, personal guarantees,
right,
and our investors risk that if the market dips a little bit, if things don't go as planned and Jerome Powell decides to raise interest rates 2 more times instead of just one, that like we've wiped out the whole company. And so that's why when I kind of nodded to this idea of, you know, if the city's going to get in the business of creating a fund and loaning money to builders and developers, one of the most valuable things the city could do is be a friendly lender, like a lender that's not like, you know, going to foreclose and take the land back if you're 2 minutes late on a payment or something, but a lender that's like, we're in it for the long haul. What we care about is seeing housing built on this parcel. And what we get from it is, you know, 20 years of deed restriction or whatever it is. But a debt partner. So like I, as a developer, would be comfortable working with the city as a debt partner that was like, we're in it with you guys. I know we're technically debt, but think of us like equity because, you know, we're going to be there for you.
Because we all live in the same city.
Right.
And if these things do turn and the city doesn't take the land from us, but recognizes that you probably can't sell the land at that point anyways, because things have gone so bad, we wait and then we build it when we can.
And I think that's somewhat what we have tried to do with surplus land, to within reason, I'll say, where, you know, if it takes you a while to stack the financing, that's okay, as long as you're still moving in that direction. So that sort of resonates with me to some degree, because I feel like that's sort of the approach we're taking with land so far. Cash is very short, so less so with cash, but yeah.
It's also in that scenario, if the partners in the city and the relationship that we just described exists, maybe the 20% return is not what we have to offer to the investors, and maybe that helps the perform in some way as well.
Great. Well, I don't want to forget about Counselor Campbell. I don't have a computer to see if her hand is still up. And if you're still there, thank you for your patience, Barb. You ready?
Thank you so much, Cindy. I just wanted to log on and say thank you. In particular, Tyson and David. I've been on city council for 8 years, and the entire time I've been with this affordable housing committee. And just a couple of weeks ago, we went on a field trip to go see the Stillwater project, and it is just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. You know, out in the public, there's this idea that developers are just these big bad capitalists, and they come into town and they do things and then they leave. And I just want to say that the day Wish Camper came into our city was a really, really good day for us. The last thing, I'll just remind all of us that one of the ways we were able to get that project off the ground was by moving a sewer project up in time in order to take that cost away. So just thanks to everybody, committee, developers, everybody. You're changing lives. You're literally getting people who are living on the streets into beautiful, affordable apartments. And I thank you so much.
Thank you, Counselor. She's always so exciting.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor. I appreciate that too. This is Tyson. And moving that's a good example of what all of us talked about. Moving that sewer project up. Other cities, sometimes their whole head explodes when you try to do something like that. And I'm not joking. I mean, because I've tried to do it, and I'm like, wait, this doesn't make sense. You're going to do it anyway. Let's just do it and work together. And then you have aligned interests, just like you would have an aligned interest with a lender in the city, trying to get things through quicker, trying to get them permanent. And it's like everyone was working toward a common goal. And it made it fun for me, rather than just trying to explain to people why this makes sense for the whole city of Bend and not just for this development. So thank you. I'd kind of forgotten about that, and it was a huge thing that really helped.
Thanks so much. All right. Thank you for being here. It's very, very interesting and great information, as always. We're on the committee. We like it.
And I feel like this is just not enough, right? I mean, I'm sure all of you have questions additionally for the whole panel. I do want to be respectful of time though, because we still have a staff report, if that's okay. What I'd love for this group to do, committee, is let me know what else you might want to hear. What have we not touched on that we should be touching on in sort of this larger revenue discussion, et cetera. Obviously, we cannot cover every possible angle, but trying to sort of skim the surface with a handful of examples here, both in need and possibility, I'll say. So let me know. You can either do that right now, or in the interest of time, if you want to email me or call me at some point in the future and let me know, then that'll help us shape future meetings and whether we need to continue to talk about this or not, and what that looks like. So that's my ask of all of you, if that's okay, Chair.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to talk about. It would be nice to have a friend in the city with a lender, but it's another thing to have numbers to where, all I do is look at numbers so I can play with them. But like this is real, and these are real savings, and it doesn't seem like it's moving the needle much, but it's making it more affordable.
That's our mortgage calculator person.
Right.
Just a note.
Thanks for looking at it, and hopefully it makes sense.
Oh no, it totally makes sense. Yeah.
Happy.
Well, I'm more into the politics of things, and I'm just wondering, is there anything legislatively that we should be advocating for at the state level that would make any difference?
I think today, no. As time goes on, well, so legislative concepts were due in already, and there are a handful. So one of the ones that I believe will come forward is the middle income property tax exemption that you all advocated should have some changes at the state level. I believe we have a legislative concept written for that by Jason Kropp, Representative Kropp, to do that. So I'll have to talk to you all about that too as we go on. But that's one of the pieces. Maybe what I'll do is, as we move forward, I'll talk to Sarah and other senior management analysts and see if we can bring together a presentation for you all on that. I'm just not 100% prepared, so I will definitely forget things or say things incorrectly. Yeah, so perfect. Okay, thank you.
I think we should advocate where we can, whenever we can, if there's something that would make a difference.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
We don't have any additional comments now. I hate being put on the spot, so I'll probably email you some ideas. If anyone else shares that personality trait, feel free to email Lynn.
I have one more comment that I want to get on the record while we're all here, because I seldom in a forum like this, but I would just want to say it. And I think most of you know it, but Lynn is very, very savvy about these things, and she's very good on affordable housing issues and keeping everybody up, the city councilors, developers, all the interested parties, and I greatly appreciate it. And I think most of us know, but I just want to say that right on the record here so that everyone understands that. Bend has a great advocate in Lynn.
Thanks, Tyson.
Can we look at what the feasibility would be of partitioning some of the AHAC funds that we receive every year, the affordable housing funds, into a potential pool that once it grows to a point we can lend?
Mm-hmm.
like a 5 or 10% of what we get annually and just put off to the side.
Yeah, and if we happen to have a bond for housing, if there could be part of that goes into that as well.
That probably would be legally difficult.
Really? Is it only for deed restricted?
You'll probably run afoul of arbitrage rules to do that. Borrowing money to lend it out and end up making.
I see. I gotcha.
Certain tax exempt ones.
That makes sense. Yeah. Darn.
Issue the bond as a grant. No, I'm just kidding.
Awesome. Well, thank you. If it's okay, Chair, maybe we can move on to staff report. You all can stick around. It's only going to be a couple more minutes. We'll talk about what's coming. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to be calling on Rachel and Amy a little bit with this too. But first thing is we have a planning commission work session on October 24th about the transportation system plan and some updates to that. So if you're interested in participating, that's one of those interactive work sessions, et cetera. Just let me know. Let's do actually, if it's okay, maybe, well, you're going to hand it off to Matt. Is that right? For the con plan update. Matt, are you prepared to talk about what the con plan subcommittee has been up to? Really quick report for us.
Sure. Yeah, we've had 2 meetings. We've had a lot of discussion, but we kind of ended our last meeting on, is there any glaring changes with what we have with the con plan that needs to be addressed? Ultimately, what's going to be kind of the forward goal? Is it different than what we need or already have? I think we wrote the con plan last time prior to the COVID crisis, so it kind of was awesome and flexible and being able to pivot for certain things. And Rachel, Heather, and myself, we kind of sat back and we're like, okay, is there anything really that needs to be addressed and changed right now? And is the comp plan that's in place, is it currently sufficient for what we could potentially be seeing in the near future, especially with rates going up, housing costs going up, maybe coming down a little bit? Is it okay with where it currently sits? I mean, I guess we're looking for some committee feedback on if there was anything that we fell short on last time. Heather, Rachel, did I cover it?
Yeah, and I think we also we recognize potentially changing priorities with, changes potentially happening with council membership, with the elections, also with the work the city is doing on sort of the camping code, and really our focus, as we even heard today, about building out shelter beds. How do we use that plan to either realign with changing priorities with council, or to really stay focused, knowing that we can't necessarily do everything we need to do at the same time? Is it an opportunity to focus on something that seems in our conversation to be more doable in the immediate? Do we need 500 shelter beds? Is that something that we can pull together and accomplish? And so that, we can hit some of those interests rather than 10 beds at a time or 100 beds at a time, or these sorts of things. So we sort of talked about that. Some of those things are unknowns. We also talked a little bit about some of the feedback from the houseless community about what they need, and raising the questions about what's the goal. Is the goal to, because there's a lot of needs. I think we focused more on that meeting on things like storage and things like that, rather than some of the elements that you raised with us today. But is our goal to sort of make available outdoor camping to as many folks who want it, and thus we would need to scale up all of these sort of storage needs and various other things? Or is the goal to really keep outdoor camping to a minimum, right? We want people sheltered, right? So, it's sort of, then how do we use the con plan to address that? So lots of just questions.
If we did scale, who would manage it?
Who would manage it, right?
We have services available and funds for such services available. We don't really have anybody to manage it.
Yeah. That's really.
So, I
awesome.
mean, that's kind of where we start. We've had two conversations where it's like, yeah. Wait,
Who's going to do it?
who's going to do it? And what exactly are we going to focus on with this? And is it going to potentially change? So we wanted to come to you guys and say like, no, change
it. Does it make sense to have sort of a topic on this at a future meeting where we really dive in maybe? Okay. So
That's really helpful, for me.
yeah.
We don't want to change it just to change it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So
Maybe do that.
Yeah.
Delicate balance between our funding allocation process.
Right.
funding never goes long.
So to be continued, I think. Thank you. And really appreciate Matt and Heather, the work that you all are doing on this. I think that's really fantastic. It's great. Well, of course, Rachel. So with that, Rachel, can I have you come up and talk about the RFP schedule? And we are definitely a little bit above 5. So folks have to go, we can go. That is no problem. Sign off. Allison, I think Mandy already did because she had to. Ian, we lost again at some point a while ago. But please feel free if y'all need to run out of here. We only have a couple more things for staff reports, so it'll be pretty quick.
And the agenda that went out also went out. The RFP schedule. It is available.
Yes.
So these are kind of the key dates I wanted you all to have in mind, that the funding applications close at 5 on October 28th. And then I'm going to get you all up to speed and ready to kind of at least review the affordable housing applications before our November meeting. That's when affordable housing developers will present, is at that November meeting. We will make affordable housing development decisions and or recommendations and deliberations at our December meeting. And then we will go into public services. We have new public service dollars. We are putting out our first commercial and industrial construction fund.
Oh, great. Yay.
And we have about $500,000.
Oh, fantastic.
Some of that is not all the construction and industrial.
I just call it construction excise tax. Finance gave it its other name that's a lot more confusing. Just call it the CET or construction excise tax, I'd say.
So not all of it is CET funding because that is not generating the funding that we had expected it to. Some of this is ARPA funding. And so we'll have ARPA restrictions to it, at least a big portion of it will. And then in addition, we just want to remind you that the where the money is supposed to go in accordance with that.
And while Rachel's pulling that up, you all may remember this is akin to the Affordable Housing Fund. Council determined at the very tail end of 2020 to create this fund. 1/3% on all commercial and industrial permits go into this fund, and it's under the new state rules. So our Affordable Housing Fund is grandfathered in. This new construction excise tax follows the new state rules now that it's allowed again. So yeah.
So those new state rules only require, or actually say that we can take 4% for administering it, and 10% of the funds must go to city-related housing. As public or the city council created in their ordinance that the remaining funds needed to go to support services and programs for people making at or below 30% annually.
So that's
some of those funds go back to the state.
No, not in the CET fund.
Oh.
It was more residential.
Yeah, gotcha.
Ready.
Yeah, great.
So just keep those like funding kind of restrictions in mind. I'll be continuing to remind you through the RFP process, but I just wanted to plant those seeds.
This is why who you vote for matters.
Yep.
So it's best if I don't respond to that.
I know. I'm just kidding. I said that out loud and I probably should have.
2 other items. My proposal is that we hold any updates on the core area group until the next meeting, if that's okay, just because in the interest of time. Though do know that Kathy and Cindy are representing you on a core area sort of developer incentives panel, basically. So we'll get more info on that later. And then wanted to talk really quickly about CFEC and next week's committee council check-in. This is not a quick topic. However, I don't know if anyone had a chance to review any of the materials, if you all want to discuss that or not. I don't know if we'll have consensus even, but would love to sort of bring that forward. And if you all want to have a discussion about it, we can. If not, we will probably sort of default to the usual discussions of affordability, how productive we can be and just ensuring the pipeline continues more or less. That's really sort of our default when we check in with council, if we haven't had consensus on an issue, for instance. So I will leave that, Cindy, if it's okay, up to you to facilitate any discussion that you all may wish to have.
Right. Well, I come from that angle of continuing that affordable housing, and what we're doing for our community stays first and foremost and doesn't get distracted by CFEC. The policy adaptations are vast. They're big changes. It's kind of, it's to me, it's funny to see it on a one page. I don't know if you remember me mentioning earlier in the year attending one of these meetings online, and the minutes from one meeting are almost 200 pages long per meeting, and they met for 2 years every month. So a lot of work went into it from a lot of people that keep in affordable housing and our projects going without unnecessary delays. And I'm not saying there would be unnecessary delays. It's just it's big changes with planning and transportation that we'll be hearing more and more about. I just started the conversation there. I don't know if anyone else has had a chance to look into it much, but this is a nice little recap, but it's really, really involved. I don't know if I can stress that any more than what I did. And if you haven't had a chance to dig into CFEC, there's a lot of information on the DLCD website. And there's information from the city as well, but it's something that I think as a committee, we should be fairly aware of how things are going to take. And it's just more, there will be additional regulation and additional rules to meet, and it's all just having to go one step at a time.
Additional rules and regulations never impact timeline, right?
Never.
Wanted to make sure.
Or costs or anything like that. Yeah. So if there's any other conversation, Barb, I didn't see your hand up. I thought maybe it might go up. I don't know.
Is the home energy
Cindy?
is that related to the?
No, it's completely separate.
Oh, and it does look like Barb wanted to.
Hey, Cindy,
Yes.
there was one other thing I wanted to mention and I forgot a minute ago, is that honestly, as of yesterday, I have hope for our permit department. I spoke to Colin for a little bit. It looks like we might finally, we've had funded positions, just couldn't find people. And we finally got all of those folks on, and a plan to actually get everybody trained and start to improve our systems. So I'm really hoping that maybe we have finally, kind of plateaued at the bottom or at the top of time, if you will, for permits. So I wanted to tell you that.
Thank you very much. That's very
Yeah, you
helpful.
bet.
Yeah. That's the CFEC discussion.
I just want to mention that the American Institute of Architects, I asked DLCD to give us a presentation. And so we have that online if anybody wants me to send them a link, or if you know other architects. We just, I think my architecture community was completely clueless that this was coming down the pike. And I wanted them to really understand what some of the impacts were going to be. So it's kind of an easy thing to watch. It's not super technical, but it's technical enough that I could maybe give you that link.
Why don't you send it to me if that's okay, and then I'll send it. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And I think this committee, I expect to be involved when there are decisions as we sort of engage with this process. I would suggest if you have the ability to watch the next 2 city council work sessions, there will be some good info presented on that. And we will, I think, be making some decisions on things like parking in the very near term, because the first deadline we are working with is December 31st. And the state has asked for us to remove all parking from a variety of different housing types, including all parking minimums, off-street parking minimums. So people can still build parking, but the state is saying we cannot require it of affordable housing and all these other different things. So that's coming soon. Barb, you didn't hear it from me first. But I think it's coming your way anyway. So just if you can, and we'll try to bring some summaries as we go. So thank you.
Barb, did you?
Yes, you guys, this is only tangentially with you, but taking away those parking minimums takes away any requirement for ADA accessible parking. Oh!
No.
No, thank you.
That's a federal law, and an architect would never not provide that, just so you know. I mean, it is a requirement that supersedes anything that a state can do. So just,
At least that's positive.
just so you know.
Like,
Too wacky.
yeah, like let's just say a 4-unit duplex. I'm probably saying it wrong because I'm getting tired. A 4-plex. There we go. This new, I even rolled my eyes at myself. The new unbundled parking would only require 1 parking space for the entire 4-plex. So that's probably going to be an ADA spot if someone just, because it's not required, but the ADA parking spot is required.
There's no parking.
So there's no required parking. That's just one of it. And we could talk until midnight tonight.
But no developer's going to want to do it, just so you know.
Right. But it's there.
It's there.
It's-
It gives flexibility, but most developers are going to want to provide the parking that they feel is required for their development. So it's not going to be a radical change quickly.
No, it won't be quick, but it'll.
We're not Boston yet.
Right.
Yeah.
We might have our moments, our facial moments. Anyhow, moving forward.
All right. I think that is it for now. But yeah, we do have positions posted. Our first check-in on that one is the backfill of Amy's position. She moved out of that affordable housing coordinator role into her current position. So we'll rehire that position. So Rachel will have some help. Yay. And then this middle income position. And so those are public right now. You guys can email us for the links if you want. Please send great people our way. We have a great candidate pool already and really looking forward to seeing how that rounds out. So thank you. That's all I have, I think. Anything else, Amy and Rachel? Okay. Thank you.
So the only other handout you got was an outline on the proposed home energy scores. The ECC committee, I hope I got that straight. I think they're going to recommend to council, and Barb, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think they're going to recommend that this new home energy score be mandatory for properties within the city limits. I've had quite a bit of dialogue with the Realtor Association, with Cassie. There's still a lot of questions with the implementation of it. Currently, there are 10 property owners in the city limits that have a home energy score. That's as of last Friday. One of them is one of the ECC committee members. Another one is CORE. Of course, they got 10 out of 10. So I think the education aspect of it is probably more than what they're anticipating. I don't know. I've listened to some of their meetings. You can look for scores or any type of home building certificates on this green building registry that's online. And there's a link, I think, in the handout that you got. And there's right now in Bend, there's 2,600 homes that have varying levels of energy of Oregon efficient homes like platinum, gold, silver. But those aren't going to be counted in with this home energy score process. So there's still a lot of questions that the realtors have. There's a lot of questions that I have. We all want energy efficient homes, just not sure how it all is going to go into place. So if you can take time to review the home energy score, I think they're having a meeting tomorrow. Is tomorrow the 14th? The climate.
That's 2 days.
Oh, the 13th. Yes. Tomorrow's the meeting, not Friday. And then I think council will be reviewing their proposal or recommendation next Wednesday. So that's on the agenda. That's one thing I'm going to speak on behalf of AHAC. So if there's any questions or anything you want to share, let Lynn or I know. Yeah.
As I was reading through this, and it may be beyond the scope of just implementing a required score system, but I think about then what, right? So these houses have scores, the goal, as I understand it, is to reduce, the footprint of use. And so that then would lead homeowners to be in a position to, make investments, right? To increase that score. And so I wonder about the feasibility of that. I mean, a lot of homeowners can barely manage replacing their roof or painting their home. And I'm certainly not arguing the need for all of these sorts of strategies, but I'm thinking about equity and affordability and who has the resources, who can actually make those investments, who doesn't, and how might the city or other resources help subsidize not just lower income homeowners, but a lot more people who are then, oh, we need to get a new water heater, we need to get a new furnace, we need to get all new windows, we need all of these things. This costs a lot of money. So those are the sort of the things I'm starting to think about.
Right. So what's been clear with my talks with Cassie, and I always want to call her Casey, so if I mix it up, sorry. The score is mandatory for property sellers, but the list of suggested ideas for like, hey, you could put insulation in the walls or whatever the suggestion is from the home energy score assessor. Currently, that is voluntary. The homeowner can do that at any time. It's just a way for a home seller to share that information with a potential buyer.
Sure, but then that leads to the homeowner having to do it.
Right, and that's been our discussion from the realtor side, because it just usually things kind of go that way, but right now they have stressed to us it's voluntary for the improvements. But there's 2,600 homes in Bend that have highly efficient homes. But when they sell, they'll have to get the score done regardless of their current level of certification. I know the city of Portland, putting my affordable housing hat on, like you're thinking you want it to be affordable. Discussions with Cassie is people that have capital A affordable homes would be exempt from getting the score if they've gone through the city of Bend affordable, if that's where they've gotten their housing from, is from our programs. The city of, that's the only thing I can see in their proposal for now. There might be some more discussion as they fine tune things. In the city of Portland, anyone who is at 80% AMI or less can have their energy score paid for by the city of Portland. There's just a lot of additional questions, and I've spent quite a bit of time researching it. I'm happy to answer questions that I can. If I can't, certainly refer it to the committee, but I'm hoping to meet with Cassie on Friday just to ask some additional questions and clarifying. But there's, with 10 homes in Bend that have home energy scores now, I'm just thinking there's a big on-ramp, is that the term we like to use, for educating on how it's going to benefit. I'm not seeing how it's going to change the climate by having the score. It is a way for people to see how efficient their homes are, but people can do that now at their own time. But with the mandatory, it would be tracked that way.
Is there enough staff to do these kinds of inspections? I mean, to keep pace with the amount of homes that are being sold? I mean, would it delay the sale of a home because there are not enough people to do these ratings?
That's part of the ongoing discussion. I think the committee has analyzed that the city of Bend would need 10 home energy score licensed assessors. And that is all, I think how to get that's in the notes. I called three 3 inspectors on Friday. One who has done the majority of the home energy scores now. I mean, there's 10, so he's done 6. He is out just to rehab from surgery, so he is not working. 2 other inspectors are on track to get their licensing through Earth Advantage. And the rates, all of them charge at least $250. And they're up to 2,000 square feet. And then they're probably going to charge more for homes over 2,000 square feet. But they did not tell me what that price would be. One is waiting for pricing. If Bend implements a mandatory score, he's going to wait to price it based on the mandatory nature. But that's only 3 inspectors that I talked to. It could be more. Yeah.
Can you find out if there's any linear correlation between having a lower score and selling a home for less?
I think the market right now is still too competitive for that.
Second plane to the equity portion.
Right. It does trigger the equity portion. That's my concern is, I know I've had several clients get estimates for solar panels because there's this new, I don't know much about it. I think there's some kind of credit with the state for solar panels, but for their 2,100 square foot house, Barb, the solar panels were $54,000. That was the fee. And I've heard that from other people. And the tax credit, I think, is $7,500, but that's still in the 40,000 range. So if it does get to that point where, hey, well, let's negotiate, the people that have less equity or the lower income, they're going to be disproportionately affected by potential improvements.
And so one thing I have read, and it could be totally wrong, because I don't think it's official yet, is that the new Inflation Reduction Act has a ton of money dedicated to pay most of upgrades for if you're below a certain AMI, which is really odd. I don't know how it'll be laid out, but so if you're, and I don't know how it would affect any of this, but I know there's increased, you mentioned solar, but everything that I've read said that if you're under a certain income for a household or something like that, that like 80% of your heat pump would be paid for. And I was like, wow, and I don't know when there's supposedly it's law now, and it'll take them 2 years to push out what we need. But there's, and like I said, it's a side note to what you're talking about, but that's one little carrot I think that's might be coming, but
I just read that outline, but not anything specific.
I know the affordable side for like solar to put on an affordable multifamily that we're looking at. There was a consultant that reached out to me a month or 2 ago that said that because of the IRA, the new act, like 70 to 90% of solar would be paid for through additional rebates that come through that. And we've always used it as a contingency bucket. If there's any money left over in the end of the deal, we'll put it on. Mm-hmm. Now we're considering potentially cooking it into the deal up front. Like I said, these are all weird changes that no one knows all the details on yet because it's not official. But anyway, I just want to let you know that that hit us recently, and I was like, no. The energy trust people I work with don't know all about, so this is like probably these are market consultants that are coming that have really gotten into it, that this helps their business, but it helps us too, right? So they're reaching out, and so it's we'll see what actually really happens, but
right,
there's a lot of that in that legislation too that surprised me, quite honestly.
Exactly.
Do we know what percentage in Bend of actual homeowners who are below 80% AMI that would actually qualify?
Mm-mm.
No.
Well, that's just the city of Portland, 80%.
Homeowners. Yeah, well, I was reading in here, there was subsidies for paying for the cost of getting the score that they would
I've only seen
offer.
total population, sort of poverty numbers, and then sort of homeowner versus renter, or what's called tenure demographics. I haven't seen the percentage of homeowners, but that would be I wonder if CORE has something like that.
My assumption is that it would be very low.
Yeah.
So that the idea of subsidizing is not all that helpful, probably for a lot of homeowners.
I would give you a cautionary tale, and I don't know if it's happening here or it's going to get suggested, but where I used to live in Sonoma County in California, the county was way out ahead. This is like 12, 15 years ago of trying to get people to put solar on. And so they were giving loans to homeowners to put solar on. And what they were doing was using companies that owned the solar panels, and they would install them on people's roofs, and it would fix their costs for their energy at that time so that they wouldn't pay for any increase in energy. The problem happened when people started to try to sell their homes, and they found out that the county had put themselves in first position above the mortgages.
First position lien.
Yes, and it was a complete disaster. People weren't able to sell their homes. They got tied up in this whole nightmare. And then other people didn't want the friggin' solar panels on the houses. They wanted them removed. And it was like there was a contract with these companies to have them for so long. And anyway, it screwed up everything 6 ways to Sunday. So I'm just saying, if you hear something like that coming forward, check in with Sonoma County, California, and find out what a disaster it was. So anyway.
Federal loan that does that goes into second position.
Right. And then when you sell, you have to pay that off. Barb, I see your hand up, and then
We probably should.
yes, and then we'll call it at 5:30, but go ahead, Barb.
Thanks, Cindy. I just wanted to chime in that the home energy score was something we considered with the last council, and it didn't pass. And here it comes again from the AHAC. I would tell you, if you would like me to join you, and when you're meeting Cassie, I'd be happy to do that if the times work out. And then I just want to tell you that, my very first question was how much would it cost? And do we have enough inspectors? And while I think the answer to do we have enough inspectors is, oh no, we don't have anywhere near. But the next question was, what does it take to become an inspector? And I found out that is a license that somebody can get in just a few months here in town. And it's not that expensive. It's not like getting a degree in order to be able to do that. So that reassured me a little bit. And I just wanted to let you know. Thanks for the discussion.
Yep. Thank you, Counselor. Okay, well, thank you for your extra time. I appreciate it. We're just practicing for deliberations, right? But if there's nothing additional, meeting adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate you staying late.
Thank you for all your information that you added.
Enforcement is-
And I'll send that link to